Hey guys, what's up? Happy Friday. Hope you guys have had a great week. It's been a week or so since we chatted, and man, we got a big one this weekend. We've been looking forward to this fight for a long time. I know that there's a lot going on news wise and other fights that I could talk about. And if you guys want to talk about those things, let me know in the chat. Phone lines are open. You can call and we could talk about anything, of course. You guys know nothing's off topic or out of bounds here, I should say. But I want to keep it personally, if I can, to this big fight Saturday, tomorrow in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, because Oleksandr Usyk versus Tyson Fury is for all the marbles at heavyweight. This is something that we've waited a long time for in a lot of different ways. So the weigh-in is currently going on. I'm going to try to share it here in a minute on my screen. I need you guys in the chat to let me know if they're blocking it, because I don't know if they're going to try to hit me with a copyright. I don't know. Like sometimes they let you show weigh-ins, sometimes they don't. But I'm going to just keep an eye on it. And when the main event gets up, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll pop it up so that we can watch it together and see what they weigh in. And I know a lot of people are curious what Fury is going to weigh, right? Anyway, let's get started, man. So I talked about undisputed. You know what? Let me pull up one thing real quick while I'm thinking of it. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. So obviously this is for undisputed, right? Usyk versus Fury, and undisputed for the first time in the 4-belt era. Obviously, that's historically significant. It is a historical achievement in that respect. But I also want to keep it in perspective. Okay. I think it's important to remember there have been literally dozens of undisputed heavyweight champions going back centuries, literally centuries. So this isn't unprecedented in that regard. However, it's been a while since we've had an undisputed heavyweight champion. It's difficult to get that in this era. It's not just because there's 4 belts. I mean, that makes it hard enough. But as you go up in weight, especially, obviously heavyweight being the maximum, it gets harder to unify these belts because there's more politics. The higher up you go in weight, there's more politics, and there's more politics at heavyweight than any other division in the sport. So it's difficult to get these kind of matchups. And for one reason or another, we haven't had an undisputed heavyweight championship fight in decades, right? And I could break all that down and talk about the history of it, but more than that, because you guys know, like I've talked about before, I do think there's a little bit of mental masturbation with the undisputed thing, the 4-belt era, so-called undisputed thing. For me, it's about number 1 versus number 2. And we haven't had that in the heavyweight division in a while. So I'm just looking here. Vladimir Klitschko fought Ruslan Shagayev in 2009. That was a number 1 versus number 2. In 2011, he fought David Haye. A lot of people thought David Haye may have been the second best heavyweight at that time. That wasn't, a universal opinion. But then Vlad fought Alexander Povetkin in 2013, and that was a number 1 versus number 2. And that's really the last time I can think where it was a consensus number 1 versus number 2 matchup. And I might be forgetting one. Just let me know, guys, okay, if I am. But that was 11 years ago, right? When Vlad fought Povetkin. Not that that was a memorable fight. It was pretty bad, but just in terms of the significance of it, when you get the 2 top guys in the division fighting each other, that's massive. And when you get it at heavyweight, it's even bigger, right? Because it's on the highest end of the scale. So in terms of historical significance, again, this is important. But I do see some people posting this is the most important heavyweight fight ever. Slow down, okay? Slow down. Let's not go that far. By the way, I'm watching the weigh-in here off screen. Vladimir Klitschko's there. That's pretty interesting. I bet there's going to be a lot of boxing royalty in the crowd, probably heavyweight royalty. I think I saw Larry Holmes too, out of the corner of my eye. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was going to be a lot of heavyweight boxing royalty there for this fight, just because of the historical significance. But sticking with the historical thing, um, I thought about this. Obviously, whoever wins, it's a historical achievement. But if Fury wins, it's historical. It's an important thing. He's undisputed. He can claim that. He can retire. He can hang his hat on that. But if Usyk wins, I think it's obviously a more historical achievement for multiple reasons. Not only is he the undisputed heavyweight champion, but he was also undisputed cruiserweight champion. Guys, the hardest jump to make in boxing, and this is something I've talked about on my show a lot, and this isn't something that media talks about enough, but it's irrefutable. The hardest jump to make is cruiserweight to heavyweight. You could argue maybe light heavyweight to cruiserweight, but in this era, cruiserweight to heavyweight, let me just put it into perspective. There is only one man that has ever been undisputed in both of those weight classes, and that was Evander Holyfield, and that was decades ago. And the guy he beat was Buster Douglas at heavyweight, right? So it wasn't necessarily like he beat an all-time great, but he was undisputed at both of those weight classes. Different era, not as many belts. I get it. That's it. And just in terms of the number of actual title holders, I'm not even talking about undisputed or unified. I'm talking about just guys who held some version of a title. The list of cruiserweight and heavyweight title holders is pretty small. It's a short list, and that division has been around now for almost 50 years. So think about that. In almost 50 years of history of the cruiserweight division, there's only a handful of guys who have won titles at both cruiserweight and heavyweight, and there's only one guy who's been undisputed at both. So if Usyk were to accomplish that, he'd be only the second man ever to claim that he was undisputed at cruiserweight and heavyweight, and he'd be doing it in an era with significantly more belts and more politics, making it more difficult for him to do it. Further, he was a guy who started his amateur career at what, middleweight, super middleweight, right? I think that's significant because you think of all the weight classes he's gone up. But you couple that with the world championships, gold at the world championships. I think it was 2011. I think it was 2012 where he won Olympic gold. All those accomplishments together, and the fact that as a pro, I was looking at this. Usyk, 8 of his first 9 professional fights were in Ukraine, okay? But every single fight since then, which I think is like 12 fights since then, have been on the road. His first world title bout was in Poland against Krzysztof Glowacki, who's Polish. Glowacki, Polish. Go figure. So he fought in Poland against Glowacki and won in every single title bout. Literally, it's not an exaggeration. Every title fight this man has had has been on the road, oftentimes in his opponent's backyard. Usyk moved up to heavyweight in 2019. He's been at the division for 5 years. He's only had basically one fight a year, I believe, since that time. But he's also had time to grow into the division. Okay, I was there for his heavyweight debut in Chicago, and he fought a journeyman level opponent. Maybe you could call him at one time a fringe contender in Chaz Witherspoon. And he dominated the fight, but there were times where he looked a little uncomfortable. Very next fight was against Derek Chisora, and he struggled at times with Chisora, right? The guy that we saw beat Anthony Joshua, particularly in that rematch, different guy. And even the guy that we just saw stop Daniel Dubois last year, and I know that there was the controversial knockdown, was it a low blow, was it borderline, blah, blah. Outside of that, if you look at the rest of the fight, the rest of the way that fight went, different guy than we saw fighting Derek Chisora and Chaz Witherspoon. He has grown into this division. Now, obviously, he's not a natural modern 21st century heavyweight. He has to bulk up and work very hard to come in at 220, 225 in these fights. But he's grown into the division in a sense that he's used to walking around at that weight now, training and fighting at that weight, and he's used to fighting bigger guys. He's been doing it now for 5 years. So Fury has waited out Usyk, and it'll be interesting to see if that comes back to haunt him. Because if you look at what happened to Errol Spence, the way him and his management waited out Terrence Crawford for more than half a decade, that ended up really biting them in the ass because Crawford had time to grow into the division as a true welterweight. Now Crawford's about to fight at junior middleweight, right? He had time to fill into that division, fight bigger guys, and get used to that and prepare for Spence in that way. Now, obviously, this matchup's completely different. Fury has a gigantic, enormous size advantage. Heavyweights, it's different, but there are some similarities in that sense that, has Fury waited him out too long? Has he allowed Usyk to get comfortable at heavyweight? Would this have been better for him to take this fight a year or so ago when it was still possible for undisputed? So that's something to look at. Okay. Let's go over some of the particulars, some of the official stuff here. Tomorrow, Saturday, April 18th, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Top Rank and Queensberry Promotions are doing a co-promotion here. This is on pay-per-view. I think you can get this fight on pay-per-view.com. You can also order it on DAZN, and I think ESPN Plus has picked it up as well if you're a subscriber there. I think the price is the same no matter which way you go. So depending on where you subscribe or whatever, you can pick it up. If you don't have DAZN or ESPN, you can go to pay-per-view.com. So that's very smart by the promotion to spread it around like that. I want to say it's like $60, maybe it's $70. Anyway, to me, it's worth the money. And by the way, this is a good card. I should mention, very good undercard. Joe Cordina, 17-0, going up against Anthony Cacace. I'm probably mispronouncing that name, but it looks like Cacace to me. For the IBF junior lightweight title, this is the third defense for Cordina. That's a solid fight. But Jai Opetaia versus Marius Bradis for the IBF cruiserweight title. This is a rematch. These two fought in 2022. Opetaia fought most of that fight with a broken jaw, was able to not only survive that, but pretty much control the fight and win clearly. It's not as if it was a shutout, but he clearly won the fight. This time, of course, he's healthy. The big thing with that matchup is Opetaia has fought twice since then and been very dominant in his two performances. He's looked really good. Marius Bradis hasn't fought since that fight in 2022. So if you just looked at the trajectory of that fight, you'd have to expect Opetaia to win and win big. It'll just be interesting to see what he could do fully healthy without the jaw. Can he stop Bradis? I personally believe he will. I think he'll stop Bradis. And to my knowledge, Bradis has never been stopped. He's lost a couple times, but both those fights went to distance. So if he could stop Bradis, that would be an achievement. I like Jai Opetaia. I think you have to say right now, the top cruiserweight. If you don't have him rated number one, okay. I personally think is the best one. He's definitely got the most upside. And I think he can actually go up to heavyweight at one point and maybe challenge and win a world title there. Because the winner between Usyk and Fury, let's face it, guys, they've got one or two more fights after this, and then they're going to retire. Neither one of these guys is going to be around in 2026, in my opinion. They're on their way out. So this is one of the last fights of both of their careers. So as soon as we get undisputed at heavyweight, it wouldn't surprise me if within less than a year, these belts are all broken up. Certainly within about 18 to 24 months, they're all going to be broken up again. And there's going to be all these open vacant titles. And by that time, perhaps Opetaia is at heavyweight and he could challenge for one of those. Speaking of heavyweights, Ajit Caballel going up against Frank Sanchez. Both of these guys are undefeated. So someone's O has got to go. This is a step up basically for both men, at least on paper. And that will be an interesting fight. And then Mark Chamberlain, undefeated lightweight, 15-0, and Sergey Kovalev. Remember him? His second bout since 2019. He's fighting at cruiserweight. So those are two notables on the undercard. A couple other undefeated prospects on the undercard. So good card overall. Worth your pay-per-view dollar, in my opinion. Okay, back to the main event, though. I talked about Usyk being the road warrior and fighting all of his fights since, again, 8 of his first 9 fights on at home. Since then, he's been on the road. A lot of times he's fought guys in their backyard. It's something that he has done consistently. And since moving up to heavyweight, he has looked more and more comfortable at that weight with each fight, which is what you want to see when a guy moves up. I thought this was interesting. I looked back at the last 3 opponents each of these fighters have faced. Neither one's been crazy active, right? It's about 1 fight a year. I think Fury may have had 2 fights a year recently, 2 fights in 1 year recently, but these guys have pretty much been 1 fight a year. But Usyk's last 3 opponents, Anthony Joshua twice and Daniel Dubois. And if you look at Dubois' last performance, that win for Usyk has aged very well, and I think it will continue to age well as Dubois continues to improve. But here's the interesting note about this, guys. AJ and Dubois are 5-0 since fighting Usyk. So Usyk did not beat shot fighters, guys over the hill or novice fighters that were making their pro debut. He fought Anthony Joshua, who is no less than the 3rd best heavyweight in the world. And then Daniel Dubois, who's a legitimate bona fide top 10 heavyweight now. And those guys combined are 5-0 since Usyk beat them. He had a couple of rough patches, little spots with AJ in both their fights. And then he had the knockdown, which, controversial. Either you thought it was a low blow or not against Dubois. But other than that, he pretty much dominated those fights, pretty much controlled and dominated those fights against the 3rd best heavyweight in the world and a legit top 10 guy. And they are 5-0 since. I think a lot of you are underrating those wins. In contrast with Fury, his last 3 opponents were a completely shot Dillian Whyte, who had been sparked out multiple times going into that fight, a completely shot Derek Chisora, and then Francis Ngannou, who was making his pro debut. Now, Whyte and Chisora have gone on to beat journeyman level fighters afterwards. They have won a couple of fights between them. But Ngannou, of course, fought an elite level heavyweight in his very next fight and was flattened in 2 rounds. So when you look at recent opposition, I think clearly that favors Usyk, right? It's night and day. That favors Usyk. So that's an X factor that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. In terms of overall opposition at heavyweight, maybe it's even between the 2 of them, okay? But in terms of recent opposition, clearly Usyk has fought the better guys, and they are still a lot more relevant. Joshua and Dubois are way more relevant in the division right now than Whyte and Chisora are, correct? I think that's something to keep in the back of your head. All right, this matchup. By the way, I'm looking over here at the weigh-in, and they're interviewing Vladimir Klitschko. So we still not to the main event yet. I don't know if I'll share this, but I'll just let you guys know what they say. Okay, this fight is so intriguing and so interesting for so many reasons. And I wanted to talk about some of this too, and I'll get to some phone calls in just a minute here. But this matchup, think about it. You have David versus Goliath, obviously, right? The optics of these two in the ring is going to be so intriguing because one guy is going to look massive compared to his opponent. It's truly going to be David versus Goliath. It's also good guy versus bad guy. Let's face it. Oleksandr Usyk is pretty much seen as the good guy going in here, and Tyson Fury in a lot of people's eyes is seen as the bad guy. So you got good guy versus bad guy. Also, you have East versus West. You have a UK fighter versus a Slavic fighter from Eastern Europe. So that's an interesting dynamic here. It's not America. When people think East versus West, they think of Rocky IV, and they think of Rocky fighting Drago. Okay, it's not quite that much East-West, but UK is considered the West, right? It's part of the West. So UK West versus Ukraine East. So you got East versus West here. And then you have the consummate professional, Oleksandr Usyk, right? The consummate professional, always shows up in shape, stays in the gym year round, lives a pretty clean lifestyle outside of the ring, never had issues with weight, blowing up or anything like that. Never had any drama outside the ring, like, getting in trouble, never been stripped of a belt. never been suspended or lost his license, never failed a drug test, none of these things. And then you have the Maverick, Tyson Fury, who has done things his own way. He's pulled out of fights. He's had all sorts of drama outside the ring. His family is kind of a circus. There's the reality show, all this stuff. So you have professional versus Maverick, right? And then you have the road warrior, Usyk here. And look, this fight's in Saudi Arabia, so obviously it's on the road for both fighters. But you could make the argument, and I certainly would, that the establishment fighter in this situation, in this scenario, is Tyson Fury. Think about this, guys. If Oleksandr Usyk wins, where does the business of boxing go? Because Usyk's already beaten all the top guys at heavyweight. Maybe it's Joseph Parker. Maybe he fights Joseph Parker or something. That might be interesting. But I'm just trying to think of guys he could fight. There's no interest in a Wilder fight. Zhang's going to beat him. So Wilder's done. Where do they go? He's already beat Joshua twice. But if Fury wins, you have a massive fight between Fury and Anthony Joshua lined up. And it remains to be seen whether Fury would even take that fight. But Turki Al-Sheikh, His Excellency, if he ponies up enough cash, they can go right back to Riyadh. Both Joshua and Fury have no issue going to Riyadh to get that bag. Guys, that fight would do record numbers globally. It would just shatter records. If they did it in the UK, if they did it in London or something, obviously there, it would smash attendance records. They could, they could build a stadium for that fight, but obviously they put it in O2 Arena. They get 100,000 people in there. It would just do massive numbers. It's a big fight. And you could argue it'd be the biggest fight in British boxing history. You could make that argument. So if you're the establishment of boxing, if you're the business of boxing, well, who do you want to win? You want Fury to win. And let's face it, Fury probably brings more money to the table. He's probably a bigger commercial box office draw than Usyk is, particularly in the West. To my knowledge, Usyk's never fought on pay-per-view. By the way, Sergey Kovalev weighing in. It doesn't look too great at cruiserweight. It doesn't look too great at cruiserweight. I don't know why he's fighting. But I mean, he looks in decent shape. But yeah, that's interesting. Fury has fought on a couple of notable pay-per-view cards here in America. He's had some pay-per-view flops here, but he has done well in some recent fights. I mentioned the White fight, the Chisora fight. He did big crowds for those fights. He did big crowds, and they did numbers over there in the UK. So in the West, and that's where the money is. Okay, let's just be real here. Fury's the bigger draw than Usyk. So again, all those factors point to the establishment wanting Fury to win. And if you look at the ring officials that were picked for this fight, I think they clearly favor Fury as well. So Usyk is fighting an uphill battle. Not only is he fighting, and this is just my opinion, okay, as a guy who's been around long enough and seen how this shit works. Usyk is fighting a much bigger guy, obviously. The size difference is going to be massive and obvious when you watch the fight. But he's also fighting against the establishment because the business of boxing, again, to beat a dead horse here, they want Fury to win because you have a massive, lucrative fight with Anthony Joshua down the road. And that's not, I'm going to pull in a little slight conspiracy here. The power of Eddie Hearn, who promotes Joshua, and the pull that he has in Saudi Arabia. He's been working over there long before Bob Arum and Frank Warren and all those guys started working over there, right? Hearn has a lot of relationships over there. He represents Anthony Joshua. He'd love to get Joshua a crack at undisputed, right? A third fight between Joshua and Usyk. Is there really going to be? It'd be an important fight, obviously. not the same as a fight between Joshua and Fury. So all those are the X factors I see here. One last thing, and then I'll jump to the phones. But this fight showcases the modern state of boxing globally. What do I mean by that? I talked about earlier. It's a Slavic fighter versus a Slavic Ukrainian fighter versus an Anglo-British fighter. It's taking place in Saudi Arabia. It's being streamed on an app, actually on several apps, and even a website, payperview.com. So the undisputed championship of the world on pay-per-view is being streamed on multiple apps and websites and different applications and sites throughout the world. Okay. That's quite a contrast to what an undisputed heavyweight championship fight looked like 25, 30 years ago. Right. Not just in terms of the logistics with the streaming and stuff, but the location being in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And then the fighters. You would think undisputed heavyweight championship growing up as a kid, it's two Americans. That's what you would think. When Lennox Lewis had his run, it was the first time we saw, Lennox Lewis is kind of an anomaly because he's British, but he's also Jamaican. And so there was this, they didn't quite know how to market him here in America because he kind of had this mixed heritage, right? His nationality, he's British, but his heritage is Jamaican. I think did he spend some time in Canada? I seem to remember. I might be wrong about that. I have dad brain, fog brain right now, so maybe I'm mixing it up. But he had this blended kind of background, and we didn't quite know how to market him over here. Like I remember HBO like making these commercials with him and stuff, and they just didn't know how to market the guy. And then we had these Eastern Europeans start coming over. And at first, the Klitschko brothers were like this weird thing. Like, how do we market these two guys? They're Ukrainian. They're brothers that almost look like twins. They fight out of Germany. Like, how do we market this, right? So it took a while, I think, for American fight fans to get used to this global nature of boxing now. And they've become accustomed to it at heavyweight, and now it's starting to trickle down to the lower weight divisions. There's obviously still some pushback from a lot of American fans and even American media. But when I look at this fight, again, it's where the two guys are from, and it's all the logistics of it. It's like, whoa, this 21st century boxing is different. It's a different world than the world I grew up in. I will say, I think it's awesome that we get to like stream this fight. And there's multiple options. So you could stream it on different platforms, different apps, and it's going to be on at 6 o'clock. I should mention that the ring walks for the main event are scheduled to take place at 6 o'clock Eastern time here in the USA. So how awesome is that you're going to see the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world in prime time, 6 p.m. Now that is like a throwback to back in the day where you saw heavyweight fights, not just heavyweight, but you saw big fights take place in exotic locations. Think of the Thrilla in Manila, the Rumble in the Jungle. You think of these historic fights that took place like overseas, and they were aired at, odd times here in America. And it wasn't uncommon to see boxing on like Sunday afternoon, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. You'd see, all and I'm not just talking about like club shows. I'm talking about big fights. So it's really, really cool. I think one of the coolest factors of this era is that we get to stream these fights live from overseas. We just had Inoue fight on a Monday morning here in America, Naoya Inoue. I think that's cool. It's one of the coolest things about this era that I'm really excited about. Okay. Real quick. I keep saying that. Oh, yeah. Okay. Matthew D'Souza in the chat says Lennox won gold for Canada. Yeah. And Chris Bergen. Yeah. He said that too. Okay. So I got that right. All right. My brain is working pretty good today. It's a Friday. And, I'm burnt out from a week of taking care of the babies, helping my wife take care of the babies. So yeah. So my brain is working. All right. So yeah, again, I think that was part of like Lennox Lewis. Like, how do we market this guy? Anyway, Lennox, by the way, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Wouldn't surprise me if he's in the house. Oh, I see Evander Holyfield's there. Yeah, it's going to be a fun event, guys. let's get to the prediction real quick. Okay. And then I promise I'm going to get to some calls. Okay. I've talked about this on my show, and I've done a couple other shows recently where I've talked about this and given my prediction, but I keep going back and forth. My brain tells me a good big man beats a good little man. That adage holds true 99% of the time. It truly does, especially when the weight difference is this huge. And it's not just the weight, it's the size, the natural. Look at their heads. Look at the thumbnail for this video. Look at their heads, okay? So you have that. You have, I mentioned the establishment. You have Fury being a guy that is not opposed to getting a little dirty in there, fouling, using his elbows, his forearms, his head, whatever he's got to do. He'll knee you in the nuts if he has to. He don't care. If it gets rough for him, he will resort to those sort of tactics. The referee is going to play a vital role in this fight. But Usyk has shown that you could kind of rattle him when you get a little nasty, right? Dubois started to go low on him. Look, guys, some of those punches were just fucking low, okay? I know some of you borderline. Some of those punches were low. Dubois started to go low on him, and Usyk, went down and took a breather and looked for a break from the ref. Now, he came back and dominated that fight and stopped Dubois. That is worth mentioning. But in that moment, it was rough for him, right? And we've seen in other fights in the past, you could put him down with body shots. It happened multiple times in the amateurs for him. He's vulnerable. He is a vulnerable fighter. He's not flawless, right? I mean, every human's vulnerable. At the same time with Fury, look, dude, Fury's been down, 7, 8 times as a professional? I think that gets overlooked. He's been dropped by journeymen. He's been dropped by former cruiserweights that moved up to heavyweight. So he can get really sloppy and he can get caught with punches. Now, do I expect Usyk to put Fury down? No, I don't expect that. But I also think it's worth noting, Usyk has had those rough moments, right? I mentioned the Chisora fight. There were some rough moments there. Even in the Joshua fights, some rough moments. Rough moment with Dubois. But how'd those fights end up? Usyk was able to weather those storms, no matter whether you find that his method of weathering controversial or not. He was able to weather those storms and win those fights, and fairly decisively. Fury has faced hardships in the ring, right? He has faced adversity, I should say. He's been dropped. He's been hurt. He's been cut. And Fury has always found a way to win. Both of these guys have a really strong will. Now, Usyk hasn't really folded in his personal life in any ways, and Fury has. Fury's had all sorts of issues and stuff where he has buckled under pressure in his personal life. But in the ring, he's a different guy. And in the ring, he has always shown a really, really strong mental toughness, mental fortitude, and a willingness, again, when things start to get rough for him, Fury gets dirty. And he's never had a ref get on him about that. And he's never been threatened with disqualification or anything like that to date. He's been able to kind of get away with some of those tactics. Now, to be fair, a lot of those tactics were employed by some of your favorite all-time fighters. Muhammad Ali was an extraordinarily dirty fighter. Broke the rules literally every round of every fight in his championship run. I'm not saying that to hate. That's just the truth. Very dirty fighter. Floyd Mayweather pulled some shit. Bernard Hopkins, extraordinarily dirty fighter. Andre Ward, very, very dirty fighter. I can continue, right? There are a lot of people that didn't like Carl Froch, a lot of his tactics they considered nasty. Ricky Hatton, a lot of people thought he got nasty and he'd go low and he'd do things like that. So there are a lot of fighters we can point to that have done this kind of stuff. And it's been part of their quote unquote craft. It is fighting after all. I understand it's boxing, but it's also a fight, guys. So You're going to see rough stuff like that in this fight tomorrow night. You're going to see Fury get rough. And it wouldn't surprise me if he tries to make a point real early on, first round, and does something a little borderline breaking the rules. It would not surprise me one bit. What's going to be interesting is to see not only does how Usyk responds, but how does the referee respond? Because this fight could get out of control if the referee doesn't rein some of that in fairly quickly. But it's going to be real interesting to see how Usyk deals with that. He's got to know it's coming. He's got to know that Fury is going to foul him and elbow him and push him down with the forearms, hit him in the back of the head. He's going to do all that stuff. And hopefully he's prepared accordingly because it's coming. You'd have to think Usyk and his team are not naive. So look, on paper, Fury should not only win this fight, he should dominate. He should win every round, beat up Usyk, and stop him in the second half of the fight. That is what should happen on paper. However, I went against Usyk in the first Joshua fight. I picked Joshua to win that fight because my rationale was a good big man beats a good little man. And I was proven not only wrong, but really wrong. Because that old adage, it is true, but a special little man beats a good big man, okay? And I think that's what we're going to get tomorrow night. I told myself after he beat Joshua, that first time around, I told myself, I'm never picking against Usyk again. I don't care who he fights. I'm never picking against Usyk again. So my official prediction is Oleksandr Usyk by decision. I say that with extreme caution, okay, for all the reasons I've mentioned. And I was on the Roundtable podcast recently, and Joe Habib was on there. And shout out to those guys, pretty awesome. And they had a great panel, man. Steve Kim was on there, a bunch of guys, Calix, a bunch of guys who I really enjoy their stuff. But he brought up a very, very interesting point that Usyk can really only win this fight in one way, and that's outboxing, outcrafting Fury and winning a decision. Fury can win this fight in multiple ways. Fury can win a decision. It might be controversial. People might feel that it's a robbery or something, but he could win a decision. He could win by knockout. There are a lot of different ways he could win. He could win by knockout upstairs. He could win by knockout with a body shot. He could win by cut. He could headbutt Usyk. There could be an accidental headbutt that causes a cut, that causes the fight to end, and they go to the scorecards and Fury wins that way. There are multiple ways Fury can win this fight. There's really only one way Usyk can win it. So again, my brain is telling me all these things and saying, pick Fury, pick Fury, pick Fury. But my heart is saying, you made a promise that you'd never pick against Usyk again. And I think we're going to see history tomorrow night. So I got Usyk by decision very cautiously. All right. Did I hit on everything? I think so. I think I hit on everything I wanted to hit on. Let's jump to the phones, take a couple of calls, and see where we go from there. Okay, let's go to the UK. I think this is Hamed. Hamed, what's up, man? How you doing?
Yes, Mike. How's it going? Can you hear me? Because whenever I call in, for some reason, my volume is low. So how does it sound now?
I can hear you just fine.
All right.
Yeah.
I was listening to what you're saying. I disagree on your last part. And I disagree with Joe because I spoke to Joe Habib, I think a couple of weeks ago on Discord. He is a big Fury fan, but I don't think Fury could beat Usyk in a boxing match over 12 rounds. I think the only way he's the contentious or controversial, that's if he just boxes for 12 rounds like he did against Klitschko. I think Usyk's much faster than him, and he's technically the better boxer, but
I agree.
I do think Usyk could. I think Usyk could win in different ways. I think Fury's best bet is to impose his will and use his size. Now that doesn't mean he can't win a decision, because if it's close or if it's remotely more competitive than the AJ rematch, I think Fury will either get it or will end in a draw. But I personally think Usyk got more tools. It's just, I think the big thing is size disadvantage, and the referee. I gotta say, this is not a good choice, because I saw Pacquiao beat Horn. I wasn't mad at the decision because of what Mark Nelson allowed in that fight, and you could argue
Talk about a dirty
fight,
fighter. Horn was really dirty in that fight.
He bent the rules.
Oh,
He bent
yeah.
the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in that fight, one judge had that fight 9-3, and Horn could have easily got disqualified. So
Yes.
I don't know why Usyk and his team allowed this to ref. Like, is there other fights where Nelson has done a good job? Because he also stopped.
I've never liked him.
Julian Williams. Yeah.
I think
He's got a track record.
them bringing him on helps Fury, in my opinion. That's how I see it. And 2 of the 3 judges, I think, help Fury.
Who are the judges?
I can't remember the names off the top of my head. I know if
Craig Metcalf is the one I recognize. I don't know the.
Yeah, well, I looked up all 3 of them, and I just looked at the way they scored certain fights in recent times, and they seem to favor the house fighter, the establishment fighter. So I think that the judging and the officiating in this fight is going to favor Tyson Fury. I just hope it's on the up and up, and we don't see something controversial. That's my hope.
What about the weight? I don't know if you touched upon it, but I don't know if you agree, but I think Fury coming in lighter is probably better. Because if he's too heavy, I think Usyk would make him look silly. And I think Fury knows if he makes this remotely close, I think he'll get the benefit of the doubt. So I think him coming in the same weight as he was against, was it Otto Wallin or some of those other fights, like I think Dylan White or Tom Schultz, I think that's a good idea. But what do you think about the weight? Because he'll have lost a lot of weight, but at the same time, I think it's probably better for him.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, when he fought Vladimir Klitschko, he was 247 pounds. It's hard to imagine Fury being that light. It's the lightest he has been. Hell, he hasn't been that light since. That's the lightest he had been since he was a prospect as a fighter. So his fight against Cunningham, he was 254. His fight against Wallin, 254. So it's interesting. I mean, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it plays out. We might be having revisionist history after the fight. But on paper, I think I agree with you that Fury should come in a little lighter, to be a little lighter on his feet and be able to box a little more, be a little more nimble. If he was fat and stationary, because he moves his head a lot, right? He's very good at moving his head, but that's a big body. And Usyk would just go to the body. They're scoring blows. He'll jab and just shoot straight left hands right to the chest over and over and over. And Fury's got to be able to move around a lot of that work. So, I think it favors him.
Yeah.
Although, Hamed, I have to mention, like my buddy Steve Kim, he thinks that it's going to hurt Fury. And he's not alone. A lot of people think that Fury has lost too much weight and he's going to be weaker in this fight than he needs to be. So we'll have to see.
That's possible, but I think it depends what type of fight it is. If it's like a nip and tuck fight, and like those fights between Klitschko and Hay or Klitschko and Fury, and it's like a really bad fight where neither guy is really doing much, or one guy's doing much more, then I don't know if the weight would be a factor. If he gets cut early, because ironically I had a dream yesterday, he got cut early, and that scar tissue I think could open up, because I didn't realize Fury's been cut 3 times.
Yes, he
Once
has.
with Wallin, Nagano, and then apparently the sparring. Whatever people believe or take that face value, that was another cut, and that tissue could open up. His eye, I don't know if that looks like it's fully healed. And
that's a good point.
If it is like the fight with Wallin, then I think the weight could be a factor. That Wallin performance, I don't know. I have not rewatched it, but I don't think that was a great performance. In the second half, he did well, and he was quite impressive on the inside. But overall, like, And Wallin, I don't think is anywhere near as good as Usyk.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not sure one way or where to go, one way or the other. But I think if it is a competitive or close fight, I think Fury will get the benefit, if not from the judges, at least from the referee. Like, to me, it seems like they want the AJ fight. Everyone wants AJ and Fury to fight.
Mm-hmm.
With Usyk, I don't know if there's any money behind him, because if Usyk wins, I don't think there's another big fight really outside maybe the rematch with Fury. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, I should mention, you bring up a good point. I do believe there's a rematch clause on Usyk's side, and I think they did that as an insurance policy because they're nervous about the judges themselves. And they had they got more of the belts and everything, so I guess they had the leverage to do that. And so if Fury wins, we're going to get a rematch between these two next. But I agree with you that, over the next year or so, the fight everyone wants to make is Fury versus Joshua. That fight is going to do insane numbers. It'll be huge.
Yeah. Before I go, my hunch was initially I thought this fight would probably, when they're talking about it, would end in a draw, because I thought they'd cancel each other out in a way. And if it's like a competitive or close fight, I think we could get both, sides arguing who won. And we've seen it so many times in the past. I think it could end in a draw. That's if it doesn't end in a stoppage. But I've seen a lot of people change their predictions, because I kind of
the odds changed. Did you see the odds change this week? Usyk was the favorite. The ring officials were announced, and the odds flipped, and now Fury's the favorite. I wonder, if we end up having a scenario where it looks a lot like the first Canelo Golovkin fight. Could be possible.
What about the Lewis Holyfield fight?
Oh,
ironically.
Wow. Yeah, that would be something.
That's the last two undisputed fights, the heavyweight, if I recall.
Yeah.
The first fight was a robbery. The second fight was closer, but if it ends like that, I think that'll be bad if it's controversial. But if it's like a fair or a debatable draw, then I don't think too many people could argue. I personally is happy the fight's happening, but I just hope it's like not controversial or like it ends in a no contest or something bad like that early on. That's the only flip side. But I'll let you get to some of the other callers, because I'm interested to hear what other people think. I think on paper is more or less a 50-50 fight, if I'm being honest.
I agree. Good stuff, Ahmed. Enjoy the fight, brother.
All right, thanks for taking.
All right, man.
All right, you too, like this.
And I'm glad Hamed brought up something that I forgot to mention. He talked about the Ngannou fight, and it got me thinking. This is a point I wanted to make. I forgot to put it in my notes. I think a lot of people have what they call recency bias. And there are a lot of people out there saying, oh, Fury shot because he was so bad against Ngannou. He's absolutely shot the shit. You don't go from now look, he beat completely washed up versions of White and Chisora, but he beat them and he was dominant in those fights. You don't go from that to being shot a year later. You just don't. I think a lot of people are getting a little too hung up on Fury's last fight against Ngannou. We have to see. And again, I might have revisionist history after the fight, and we might see maybe Fury is shot to shit. Maybe we'll see, but I don't think so. I expect the best version of Fury in this fight. I really, really do. I think we're going to see the best version of Tyson Fury. We're going to see the guy that fought Deontay Wilder in their rematch. We're going to see the guy that fought Vladimir Klitschko. Those are the two best performances of his career. That's the Tyson Fury I expect tomorrow night. I truly do. And it's the same thing with Usyk. People talked about, oh, he got knocked down against Dubois, and it should have been a knockout, all that stuff, right? Again, I think people are getting a little too hung up on this moment in a fight that he ultimately survived and went on to dominate the fight. But here's my question. Can these recent performances affect the way the judges score the fight? Because if they look at, Hamed mentioned Usyk's fights against Joshua. If this fight looks closer and more competitive than those fights, which it probably will the judges remember how Usyk looks against Joshua and think, well, he's not looking as dominant against Fury? Could that sway them to scoring rounds for Fury? Also, will they remember Fury's performance against Ngannou and how bad he looked and how close those rounds were? And if these rounds look, if he looks less sloppy, if he looks sharper, will that affect the way they score a round? So those are some more of the X factors and the things that I'm curious about, and I will admit, nervous about. I am, because I just don't know if we can trust the judges and the ring officials to do the right thing. I hope they're not part of the story. I just hope we get a really, really good fight and the ring officials are not part of the story. All right, back to the phones. Let's talk to Nacho. Let's see what he's got to say. Nacho, how you doing, bro? Nacho.
I'm good, Mike.
Oh, what's up, man?
Yo.
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on? Not much. Yeah, there's definitely some variables in this fight coming up tomorrow night that are interesting. And I think Hamed brought up a fight that I was actually going to bring up, the Lewis Holyfield fight. I mean, what if we end up getting a draw out of this fight and then no one is satisfied with the outcome? And then is there a chance that they end up doing it again? Or does Fury end up, does he end up, deciding to do something else? Like, I'm going to be curious.
Well, there's a rematch clause, but he could retire. He could win and be like, hey, I'm the greatest ever. I don't need to prove anything else and retire. I mean, he could. And then once Usyk fights someone else, he can come back and fight Joshua. Like Fury would do something like that. That's how he does things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's totally possible. Like those scenarios that you're talking about definitely could exist. I mean, my only concern, Mike, is that Frank Warren is pretty much the promoter of record. And since he's Tyson's promoter, I'm just wondering if somehow there isn't a possibility that maybe, just maybe, those judges and the referee might not be swayed to kind of tilt the scales in Fury's favor just a little bit,
And let's not forget, it's a cross promotion between Frank Warren and Bob Arum, and Bob Arum represents Fury here in America. So I mean, the promoters of record, again, the whole thing favors Tyson Fury. I mean, that can't be denied. It's undeniable at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, the way I look at it is Usyk is it's like Steve Kim usually says, Usyk's going to have to win 10 rounds in order to get credit for 8.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be that dominant of a performance.
He's going to have to be what he's going to have to do what Bivol did against Canelo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because that coming into the fight, those judges are going to kind of be favoring Fury, and Usyk has to basically dominate that fight in order to make it undeniable that he won that fight. So that being said, I mean, I honestly think that the typical Tyson Fury mind games and all the little, the bullshit that he normally pulls on his opponents that kind of gets under their skin, and he ends up, kind of having a little bit of a psychological advantage over them, that hasn't worked at all. And I think at this point, Fury has to be just a bit nervous going into this fight, because no matter what he's tried, Usyk hasn't taken the bait. So I think he's going to be questioning himself just a little bit. And also, too, Mike, I just think he made a mistake coming in as light as he did. He should have been smarter, and he should have probably come in a little bit heavier than he did. I don't think coming in as light as he did is going to benefit him, because to me, Fury isn't the type of guy that's going to be able to box from the outside for 12 rounds. I just don't see it. Mm-hmm. This isn't a Deontay Wilder that you're facing. You're facing a shorter, more compact guy who's going to be able to come in and out, use angles, give you different looks, and he's definitely going to make you work. So this idea that Fury is just going to be able to box from the outside and not really have to engage on the inside, I don't know. I just think that Usyk should have a really decent shot to pull off this upset tomorrow, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you.
So yeah, the rest of that card. I mean, like you said, Mike, I like the Opetaia Bradis fight, but I'm kind of leaning towards Opetaia more than Bradis because, like you said, Bradis hasn't fought since the last fight, and he's 38 years old, and he's been in a lot of tough fights. And Opetaia is the younger, fresher guy, so I kind of expect Opetaia to go in there and kind of dominate this next fight, and take that belt back from him. So I kind of figure that that's how that fight's going to be. The interesting fight is going to be that Cordina fight. Mm-hmm. To me, Mike, after having seen his last performance against Vasquez, I'm not sold that Cordina should be sticking around at 30 anymore. I think he kills himself to make 30, and maybe this might be the last time he fights at 30 before he decides to move up. But do you know anything about his opponent? I've kind of looked at his box rec, and I haven't seen much of anything that makes me think that this guy is a legit threat.
I haven't either. I think, did I see he's Irish? He's from Ireland. His last name looks Italian to me. It looks like Cacace, but I don't know how it's pronounced. Let me pull it up. Let me see, just to make sure. I want to make sure I get this right. Make sure I don't screw it up. I'm sorry. No, he's from Northern Ireland. Sorry. Belfast, Northern Ireland. But I looked at his resume and I don't see a whole lot on there. I really don't. He's fought pretty much exclusively in the UK. I think he's fought outside the UK a couple times, but nobody really of note. Oh, Oleksandr Usyk's on the stage right now, about to weigh in. But yeah, I don't know, dude. I honestly don't know.
Okay. What do you think of the Caballero? Is it
Caballero Sanchez?
What's the German? Yeah. What do you think of that fight, Mike?
Honestly, we're gonna see which one of these guys is for real. They've had less than stellar opposition between the two of them, so this is kind of a step up. And both of them are undefeated. I give them credit for putting their undefeated records on the line, but I don't know how to pick it. I mean, on paper, Sanchez, being the Cuban school of boxing, should have the skill advantage, but does Caballero maybe have the power strength advantage and maybe some intangibles that he brings to the table? I don't know, but I'm interested in that fight, man. Two undefeated heavyweights. Let's see it. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, for sure. And then just real quick, the other card that's going on tomorrow after this one, how do you see Navarrete-Baranchyk playing out? I think Navarrete probably wins that fight just because I've seen Baranchyk. I think he's a decent fighter, but I don't think he's a threat to pull off the upset. What do you think?
I don't either. And Baranchyk has had some tough fights, dude. He's taken some punishment. He's had a couple of rough fights, so just long, grueling kind of fights. So I just think Navarrete with his volume, volume punching, I gotta favor him. I think he's gonna look good.
Okay, and then the Santillan Norman fight. I mean, I think Santillan is the favorite in that fight. But do you think Norman has a chance of actually showing up and pulling off the upset if possible?
I don't know enough about Norman, to be honest. I don't know enough about him. Oh, hold up. I'm going to turn on the volume here to hear the weigh-in. Let's see what Usyk weighs. Wow. Usyk, 233 pounds. Interesting. That's wow. Heavy. That's heavy, huh?
Yeah. I didn't expect that.
That's the heaviest.
He'd be under 230.
He was 221 against Dubois and Joshua both times. He was 217 against for 233. You could tell he's definitely coming in. Hold up, Fury's getting up there. 262. 262 for Fury.
Hmm.
So 233, 262. So, okay, the weigh-in bros. It's time for the weigh-in bros to get involved here. 262 for Fury. He has not been this light since he fought Otto Wallin. Interesting. So you got to go back 5 years. He hasn't been this light in 5 years. And for Usyk, he's never been this heavy. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't expect Usyk to come in that heavy. I thought, if anything, at most he might be about 225 for
Me
this
too.
fight.
Yeah.
233 is a lot heavier than I thought he would be.
He does look,
But
I'm just
yeah,
looking at him.
Fury
He looks a little
260.
softer than normal, Usyk in the midsection. I don't know if they just wanted to put on extra weight to handle. Wow, look at this stare down. It's crazy, bro. Just the size of Fury pushed him. Gee, that wasn't predictable. Fury just
Yeah, like
pushed
we
him.
didn't see that coming.
We didn't see that coming.
Exactly.
Wow, what a surprise.
Yeah, we didn't see that coming.
I wish you could bet on, like, if they're going to shove each other at the weigh-in, because this would have been an obvious bet the over. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's probably why they don't do it, Mike. They know that was going to come.
Right?
Like, they're not dumb. Casinos aren't dumb. They kind of know how this works.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
So
for real.
they ain't going to put something up like that. Yeah. Yeah, that's surprising. I'm a little surprised that Usyk came in 233. Didn't expect that. I thought he'd be a little lighter than that, but
the plot
maybe they figure they want him to be able to withstand any kind of mauling and roughhousing that Fury's going to be trying to put on him. You know, maybe that's their thinking.
I will say this,
kind of absorb it.
I'm just looking here at the weigh-in, and like Oleksandr Usyk looks very stoic, very calm, very relaxed, and it's Fury like bouncing around and shucking and jiving and stuff. And I know he always plays up to the crowd, but I just wonder if he's trying to pump himself up. You know what I mean? He doesn't. To me, I don't know. I don't know if he looks comfortable. I think he realizes all the pressure's on him. Do you agree with me, Nacho, that Fury needs this win more than Usyk does? I really do. To kind of sew up his Hall of Fame credentials, he needs this win.
I think so too, and I think that's why he's been so, like, how could I describe it? He's been kind of anxious this whole promotion.
Yeah.
Because he knows that there's so much riding on the line, especially for his career, because of the fact that outside of the Klitschko and outside of the Wilder fights, you can't really look at his resume and go like, yeah, that's a certified, no doubt, first ballot Hall of Famer.
Right.
And that's why I think he knows that he needs this win. I think if Usyk was to lose, Mike, it wouldn't affect him because he's already come out on record yesterday and said that he plans on fighting at least another 3 to 4 years. So I think in Usyk's mind, he's going to add more to his legacy to try to be a lock first ballot Hall of Famer. But with Fury, who's about to be 36 in a few months, and he's kind of had these long layoffs in his career, I don't see him sticking around much longer. And I wouldn't be surprised that, like you said, if he was to somehow win this fight, I wouldn't be surprised if he walked off into the sunset and said, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, I don't got nothing else to prove. Like, I think he would be thinking to himself, yeah, I'm losing out on the Joshua payday, but it doesn't matter because I walked away undefeated and I beat the quote unquote best guy in the division outside of myself. So I wouldn't be surprised if somehow he won this fight. He just said, I'm done. Like, I don't got nothing else to prove. Like, to me, Fury is a lot like Floyd Mayweather in that he's trying to preserve that Mike, so he can make the case about
and Andre Ward.
How he's the greatest.
So, Andre Ward too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why he's so nervous about this fight, because I think in his mind, he knows that there's a legitimate chance he could lose.
Right.
And that's why I think he's been as anxious and nervous as he's been. I'm kind of glad that Turkey has held his feet to the fire with the $10 million fine, Mike, because if there was no fine, I wouldn't have been surprised if he would have said like a month ago, I hurt myself in training and we're going to have to postpone the fight. Like, I just have a feeling that shit would have happened again. I really do. I think he would have found a way to weasel himself out of the fight. So I think the fact that they held that fine over his head if he tried to, back out of the fight again. That was a great idea. So I'm glad that it's going to finally happen, and we'll see it tomorrow afternoon. And like I said, Mike, just real quick, Norman Santillan, what do you think about that fight?
I was just going to say, I don't know enough about him. I mean, Santillan's the betting favorite, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he should be. I just don't know enough about the other guy to give you an honest opinion.
Okay. I mean, he is from Atlanta, so I figured maybe you heard more about him because, you're in the area.
I've heard of him, but
there.
I don't even think I've seen him fight here. I'd have to, you know what? I might have seen him fight once, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
I need to.
All right.
Let me look him up real quick.
All right, cool, Mike. Well, yeah, I'm sure you got other people on the line. I'll just jump off. Thanks.
All right, man. Thanks.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Yeah, look, Brian Norman, he's out of Decatur. I'm trying to okay, yeah, I have seen him fight a couple times. I saw him fight at Buckhead Fight Club a couple times. Yeah, he hasn't fought anybody. Santillan should handle him. I don't think he's going to be in any trouble. Sarah Lechak with the super chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And let's keep it going on the phones. Let's jump to Dad. What's up, man? How you doing?
I am right now pulling into the casino to finish off my my bets for this fight. I wouldn't recommend this fight, for people that are just, trying to make $1 million and trying to make a living. There's a lot of good prop bets here, especially the fact that Usyk came in at 233. I think they followed my advice, tongue in cheek. When I said on your show months ago, I said, or a month ago, I said this fight might have the aesthetic of Tommy Hearns, Ray Leonard 1, where the boxer became the puncher and the puncher became the boxer. And Tyson Fury might be Tommy Hearns and Usyk might be Sugar Ray Leonard in this fight. I think there's a role reversal. And I think Usyk and his team, I think they realize that after seeing Triple G robbed against Canelo, Kovalev robbed against Andre Ward, Vasyl Lomachenko robbed against Devin Haney in Vegas, they finally said, hey, we're not going to get a fair shake. We're the obstruction. We are the ones the establishment do not want meddling in this whatever cabal political landscape in boxing. They're looking to take this out of the judge's hands, Mike. 233, that means Usyk's going to sit down on his punches. He's not going to be very active or as active as he usually is. He's going to be more methodical and precise, and he's going to look to sharpshoot Fury. So my prediction on this fight now is pretty much how I was thinking if exactly this weigh-in went the way it went. That Tyson Fury is going to do just enough to keep the rounds even, because he knows in his mind, if the rounds are even, he's winning those rounds. Right. It's going to be like Devin Haney. All he got to do is keep the rounds where nobody's a winner, and he wins by attrition. He wins just because he's Tyson Fury, and he's the A side, and the establishment wants him to win. Usyk, on the other hand, I think he's going to put the foot on the gas in round 10 and 11 and go for the knockout. I think Lomachenko made a mistake by not selling out completely, and I think he realizes that he's going to have to ramp up. And I sent you a bar graph, Mike, or a line graph, I should say. And it's pretty statistically significant. Tyson Fury's output over rounds 10, 11, and 12 decrease almost 30%. Whereas on the flip side, Usyk's output increases in rounds 10, 11, and 12 by 30%. So if that fight is even, or maybe Usyk's down a little bit, I think he pushes the button and comes on late to force a stoppage. Okay. Or if it's legit on the scorecards, he could eke it out with those last 3 rounds. Because Fury really, he has very, very small, output in those rounds.
Interesting.
But
I didn't know that.
I really do. I sent you the graph. You should check it out.
Okay.
It's significant in this fight. I think that's the only thing that really tells a true tale, because there's never really been a matchup either has had that mimics the other, except for maybe the Otto Wallin fight. And Otto Wallin's an extreme poor man's version of Usyk, and he completely gave Fury trouble, and Fury knows it. He knows the style's all wrong for him. Usyk's used to fighting bigger guys. It's just Tyson's length, his arms, his forearms from his elbow to his hand, his wrist, that forearm is absolutely enormous.
Yeah.
And in the clinch or inside an arm punch from that type of forearm, you get clipped by it. It's hard to get around, grapples you. It's just a mess. So I think Usyk's he knows that every punch he throws, it has to count. All right. It's not going to be for window dressing like against Joshua. He'll throw a couple flicking shots and then land one big one to try to pull his guard down. I don't think he's going to use that. I really do think he's going to sit down and he's going to throw hard leather. And from what I've read by his sparring partners and so on and so forth, people who fought him, they said when he wants to punch, he could punch. He could really crack. He could really crack. So my official prediction, Usyk late 10th round stoppage, middle 11th round stoppage.
Wow.
If Fury's going to win, it's going to be by split decision. And if it goes to the cards, I don't see Usyk winning a decision. He's just an obstruction at this point to the bigger picture. If they have a chance to rob him, they're going to. And like you said, those judges, when I first saw them and I saw the odds flip, I knew something was there, because two of those judges, Palomo, terrible judge.
That's right. Palomo,
he's always going to vote for the house fighter.
Yeah.
Fitzgerald, the American, he'll always vote for the house fighter. The other guy, Metcalf, he did judge Usyk's fight against Myers Breedis, and he scored it a draw. Okay? He's fair, but again, that Myers Breedis fight, it was a close fight. Usyk won in my card, 7-5, but he had it a draw. I thought those rounds were pretty clear. So it doesn't look good for Usyk. And this referee, Mark Nelson, I think his name is. I didn't do my research on him yet.
He favors Fury.
So
his style favors Fury. I mean,
well,
look, the promoters pay for the ring officials ultimately. So then they select them. So, but the promoters involved in this promote Fury. So they're going to pick guys that benefit their fighter. Usyk has to know that going in. He has to look at all the similar situations like this in recent years. You mentioned some of the fights, and he has to have planned accordingly. You would think that they would have planned accordingly for all of that.
Well, it looks like it from our vantage point at 233, unless he's got a bunch of egg wakes in his pocket, aka Deontay Wilder. I think that they bulked up because they know they got to put some power on those shots, and they have to take this out of the judge's hands. And I love the proposition, even money over knockdowns. One knockdown, even money. I like Usyk to knock Fury down at least once, and I think you'll get a lot more money on that bet. But I don't see Fury knocking Usyk down. I think the balance is too great. I definitely see Usyk putting down Fury at some point in this fight.
Wow.
So that's a prop I'm all over. Yeah, I think I'm going to at least get 2 or 3 to 1 on that one. Because over-under is 0.5.
Okay.
And it's even money.
Okay.
So, yeah, take a look at that. And if you're going to bet Fury at plus 800, split decision win. Fury plus 1,400 majority decision win. I think it's going to be either or. I don't think that they can get away with giving him a unanimous decision. And the draw prospect went from 18 to 1 to 16 to 1 to 14 to 1 to 12 to 1. Now it's down to 11 to 1. I don't see it being a draw. I just think that they want a one and done here. I really don't want to see. I really don't think that the establishment wants to see a rematch here. If Usyk loses, I think they'll give him a step aside or some kind of payoff to get him to walk away, because they want that AJ fight in the worst way. And the rhetoric from Turki Al-Sheikh when he's talking about how the IBF is sticking their nose where it doesn't belong in regard to Canelo versus Crawford, where they're giving that Skull guy a mandatory.
Yeah, I saw that.
They're really adamant about that.
Right.
They're really trying to push the agenda. They want these fights made, for better or worse, and I don't think they want any obstruction. And from my point of view, Usyk's an obstruction.
Right.
So he knows he's going to have to knock him out, and I think that's what the plan is. So my prediction is round 10 or 11 Usyk, and if he goes to the scorecard, it's Tyson Fury by split decision, most likely, or majority decision. So
All right.
take what you will from it. I've seen this script how many times already? I mean, they're not going to change from the Triple G, Sergey Kovalev, Vasyl Lomachenko routine. They're always going to favor the fighter against these Eastern Europeans because they bring, in their minds, they bring nothing, no economic benefit because they're basically right now like third world countries in regard to the econ.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know if it all makes sense to you, Mike. You made a lot of logical sense with the fact that there's the recency bias with the decisions and how Fury looked horrible against, Ngannou.
Mm-hmm.
And will the judges now see him do better against Usyk, and they'll score rounds for him now? Whereas with Usyk taking body shots, will they take a look and say every time he gets hit to the body, it hurts him? Where clearly that's not the case. It's just this narrative that's been put out there. There's a lot that's going against Usyk. There's a lot of public sway. There's a lot of propaganda. I think these judges will be influenced by it. This is the world we live in, Mike. We're glad to get these fights, but I think the politics really aren't going to let us see a real winner here unless Usyk stops him.
Well,
do you have anything to add or any other question here on the other fights? I mean,
no, I think, you make great points. There are going to be people out there that say you're being conspiratorial and you always favor the Eastern European fighter and that kind of stuff. But I get where you're coming from, Thad. It's that it's not that you favor the Eastern European fighter. It's just that you see a pattern of these guys getting screwed.
Right.
And that's what I've talked about.
Right.
If it was 50-50, if sometimes the Eastern European fighter was screwing over the Western fighter,
right,
then it wouldn't be as big of a deal. But when you see one particular group getting screwed every single time, or at least 10-1, then there's a pattern there. And boxing always goes with the money in these big fights. And Western fighters bring more money, whether they be American, UK, Mexican. That's the power structure. Now it's changing, and it is changing, but the power structure and the money is still mostly in the West. And I'm with you on it.
And from this perspective, how can you not? Like we've seen it. We've seen it play out countless times. I mean, it doesn't end. So why should it change now? Especially when there's something on the back end.
I was just going to say,
doesn't favor the Eastern European fighter.
It's okay if you had Canelo beating Golovkin in the second fight, if you had Haney edging Lomachenko, it's okay. Like those were close fights, right? But again, when every single close fight goes in a certain direction, then it's not, it becomes a pattern. And so I think it's perfectly reasonable to suggest that if this fight is close, it's going to go to Tyson Fury. Oleksandr Usyk has to do, again, I mentioned it earlier, he has to do what Bivol did to Canelo to get a decision. It's going to have to be that decisive.
To win 7-5.
Because I mean, Bivol, I think those scorecards were like 7-5 for Bivol. He won 12 rounds. He won every round of that fight.
Sickening.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And when you look at the Lomachenko fight, when you see that Dave Murray, that scumbag, voting the 10th round, he gave that to Haney when Haney got bounced around and outclassed. He gave that round to Devin Haney. That right there is corruption. It's already right there for everyone to see. If you can't see it, then you're biased yourself. And at this point, if you're that stupid and desperate to rely on boxing and a fighter to live vicariously through, like amazingly so many of them do, okay, then that's on you, man. You're the person that's the problem. When you are looking at a fighter that says, I have the same skin color as him, my God, I win because he wins. It's through osmosis that I'm a great person. No, you're not. You're a loser. Okay? It's a sport. You have nothing to do with this outcome. Okay? You're still who you are, regardless of who wins. But they look at it differently. So people need to stop interjecting this culture bias. You can root for whoever you want, but don't start saying, oh, well, you're wrong because you're biased and you're putting out conspiracy theories. No, it's actually statistical fact. Okay? So take it for how you want. I'm a businessman. It's all about making money for me. I left my fandom on the porch, okay? Because I'm done being a fan. I've been robbed blind. I've been that guy in Vegas Vacation, Clark Griswold at the blackjack table when the dealer said, hey, Clark, why don't we go out? Hey, Griswold, why don't we go out in the back alley? You hand me all your money. I kick you in the balls and we call it a day. That's how I feel after all these robberies the past 20, 30 years. That's how I felt as a boxing fan. So
it's hard.
I'm done.
It
being
makes
a
me
fan.
cautious to buy pay-per-views. And that's why I really don't buy many of them. I openly admit it. You know, I do the Fire Stick 90% of the time these days. I think I'm going to bite the bullet and buy this pay-per-view. But you know, I have that feeling inside, just like you do, that we could get ripped off again. I really hope that's not the case.
Yeah.
But obviously, we'll talk about it afterwards. You got anything else, man? I need to drop and get the next call.
Yeah, I think J.O. Pataya, it's going to look like Holyfield versus Cowie 2. Okay, the rematch. Cowie got stopped early. I think Breidis gets stopped late. I think there are two ships sailing in two different directions at this point. Don't sleep on Opataya. He's a star in the making. And Breidis is a former great fighter. He just hasn't been active. So I really love that round 7 to 12 prop of Breidis, by stoppage. And you get plus 150. It's not going to be crazy like Lomachenko last week. From now 9 to 12, he was plus 700 by stoppage. I literally jumped for joy betting him and Shanika Johnson as a plus 300 underdog to win by decision. That was a beautiful thing, and I told you that I was doing that too. And so this week, I love the prop. Usyk 1 knockdown.
Okay,
take it.
All right,
you make some money, and then Usyk in round 10 and 11, you'll get 30-1 odds that you'll win by knockout in round 10 or 11. So if you're going for the home run score, that might be it. And the round block, rounds 10 through 12, you'll get plus, I think, 1,400 for him to win by knockout in those 3 rounds. But then in the exact round, 10 is like plus 2,800, 11 is plus 3,300, which I think is a great one. And then 12, he won't win by stoppage in 12. I think I'll just go to the cards. But yeah, that's all I have to say. So, Mike, I just hope it's a fair fight. That's all I hope.
I hear you, brother.
May the best man win.
All right, good stuff, Dad. All right.
All right, bye.
Yeah, and again, just to drive this point home before we jump to the next call, because Thad comes on and he talks about these fights a lot because he bets a lot. He's a guy who bets pretty much all the fights all the time. It's how he makes a lot of his money. So, and he's successful at it. He does very well at it. So, again, there is a pattern. And I think a lot of you guys make it about ethnicity. Take that out of it. You make it about race or ethnicity. It's not about that. It's about money. Because this is a pattern that goes back in boxing centuries. Okay. I've talked about this before. When there are waves of new people coming into the boxing world, as boxing has become more increasingly global, like when the Latin American fighters started making waves, they got ripped off. There are plenty of fights I can point to going back. I mean, this is going back decades, but a lot of the Latin American fighters would fight an American fighter and get ripped off. They were the new kids on the block. They didn't have the power. They weren't bringing in the money. Then it became where the Latin American fighter or the Latin fighters became the power structure. And now you got a guy like Canelo who's, runs the sport. And you mentioned Oscar De La Hoya, right? There are plenty of guys, names I can mention where if you see a Mexican fighter versus a Kazakh fighter or Russian fighter, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt on the scorecards, especially in a commission like Nevada, which is an establishment commission. There's big deals there with the casinos. There's a lot of money at stake, and they don't just make deals for the current fight. They're thinking down the line, the next 3 or 4 fights, the next 18 to 24 months, where they can go with this. Okay. So it's chess. These guys are playing chess. And when you see patterns, I think it's perfectly fine and reasonable to call them out. And I think that if you look at the pattern in recent fights on paper, again, I keep using on paper, because you don't know how it's going to play out in the ring. That's why they fight the fights. But on paper, everything here lines up to favor Tyson Fury. And if you're denying that, then I think you're kind of blind, and you've been blind to some of the recent happenings in this sport. Hamed, I saw in the chat, brought up another recent robbery, Castaño, getting a lot of people thought that he beat Charlo in their first fight. So there's an example where Charlo isn't necessarily a big name, but he's a slightly bigger name, at least in the United States, than Castaño. And he was the house fighter. His promotion was promoting that fight, and he got the benefit of the doubt on the cards. There are dozens of examples I can bring up just in this decade of, and it's a clear pattern, guys, where certain fighters from certain parts of the world get the benefit of the doubt over other fighters. But more than that, it's just the bigger name, the guy who brings in more money, and the guy with potential money, future money down the line, he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. That's just how it works. And in this case, that guy is Tyson Fury. So I fully, truly believe Usyk is going to have to win 8 or 9 rounds in this fight to get a decision. I truly believe that. I'm not saying it to say that the fix is in and I'm a conspiracy theorist. Okay. That's the last thing that I am. But if you just look at the way boxing works, everything points to that. Okay. Let's jump to one more call here. We're going to go to Miami, Florida, 305. What's up? You're on the show.
Hi, this is my first time calling, Michael. My name is Anthony. Michael,
What's up?
This is where, for me, when I look at this fight, to be honest, the judges, to me, don't worry as much. If it was like guys like Moretti and other American judges that have had a track record of being biased, I would be more worried about the judges. The referee is the one that scares me more because of how he refs fights. Would favor. I agree with you. He would favor his style of refereeing favors Tyson Fury, where he's not going to push Tyson Fury off Usyk and stuff like that. And I have it on. I might be one of the few people that has it a majority draw. I can see it a draw because the judges are not going to be as much of a factor as people are making it out to be, because of if it's not like guys like Moretti who have a tendency to be biased and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If Bob Heyman, Bob Arum have brought those guys over, then I would be worried about the judges. But since it's not judges that are not as well known and don't have a track record with big fights, I'm not as worried and stuff like that with the judging. And to be honest, I think it's a mistake. I agree with Ahmed that it's a mistake that Fury lost all this weight this quickly. And I think it's going to be overtraining, not the weight that. It's more overtrained to me than the weight that scares me for Fury. Do you agree?
I don't know yet. I honestly don't know. I keep going back and forth on it. But you know, yeah, I mean, Fury hasn't been this late in 5 years. So, will he look better? Will it hurt him in the late rounds? Did he leave too much in the gym? Did he overtrain? We'll see. I mean, I got to admit, you know, I saw his body at the weigh-in, and I'm not a weigh-in bro. I'm no expert on the weigh-ins, but he's skinny, but he's still skinny fat. He's still got a gut. He's still, you know, he doesn't look necessarily ripped. You know, he doesn't look the way he looked against Wilder in their rematch. His body doesn't look as good, at least from what I saw. So maybe he cut muscle. You know, we'll find out. But yeah, on the surface, you might be right, man. You might be right.
Yeah. And when it comes to that specifically, was him saying that he was coming in at 219 just mind games to screw with Usyk, or did you at some point during that press conference actually believe that he was 219, or do you think that was just BS coming out of Tyson's mouth?
That's just typical Tyson Fury. Yeah, that's just typical mind games from Tyson Fury.
And Usyk, honestly, Usyk has too many screws loose in his head to even let mind games affect it that much. Like, that guy, there's something wrong with him. Like, if you look, every time I see a press conference with the guy with other fighters, and people try to play mind games, and you look at his eyes, it's like there's nothing there. Mm-hmm. There's no emotion there. Is that common with the Eastern European fighters, where they're not as like gregarious and outgoing?
Yeah,
are Eastern European fighters like that?
It's a cultural thing. It's also with the Asian fighters a lot of times too. It's just Eastern culture. Whether it be guys from Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia, because a lot of the Japanese fighters are the same way. They're just very stoic, and they don't get involved in all the talking and stuff. That's more of a Western tradition with the fighters here in America, and even increasingly in the UK. You see a lot of that. But yeah, these guys, you know.
And your previous call about Tyson Fury versus AJ too, Mike, to me, that I may use a parallel in professional wrestling. I'm a professional wrestling fan and a boxing fan. A Rock versus Steve Austin fight doesn't necessarily. It would benefit from a title, but it doesn't necessarily need a title if it's at a pay-per-view. I think that works the same parallel with AJ versus Tyson, where the fight doesn't necessarily, it would benefit from the title, but it doesn't necessarily need a title to make it a bigger fight. The fighter, because they're two great British fighters, the fight really doesn't need a title. Do you agree, or it has to have a title, in your opinion?
I think that if Fury were to lose this fight against Usyk, but were to look pretty good doing it and just came up short, I think a fight between him and Joshua still does massive numbers. It's still just a big fight. But it's better if it's for undisputed, and I'll tell you why. Joshua and his promoter, Eddie Hearn, they really want that. And they run shit in the UK. And they have a lot of inroads with the money in the Middle East that's putting up the money for these fights recently. They have more than any other promoter in the world. So that side of it wants that undisputed. And if they could fight for undisputed against Fury, that's what they would prefer. So that's why I say the establishment wants Fury to win, because an undisputed heavyweight. Imagine if Joshua were to fight Fury next year or something and win the undisputed championship. AJ could say he won the titles, lost to Ruiz, won them back, lost to Usyk, came back from that and become undisputed. That's epic. That's historic, right? So the storyline there would be unbelievable. You couldn't pass that up. So that's what the establishment wants. So I do think it's not just that it's one belt, dude. I like your analogy. It makes a lot of sense. But in this particular case, the business wants it to be for undisputed. You know what I'm saying? Oh, it looks like the call dropped. Oops. Sorry about that. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Hey, man, call back. That was a great call, dude. That was a great call. Let's see. I want to get to Sanch. I saw a comment here. It said, I'm out here in line getting some king taco. Bet you can't get that in the South, Mike. Hey, dude, I got to say, the Mexican food here in Atlanta, obviously it's not as good as Los Angeles. Definitely nowhere near in the same stratosphere as San Diego, which is really, really good. But it's better than I thought. It really is. In comparison to like Dallas, because I've been to Dallas a lot for work and different parts of Texas, Mexican food here in Atlanta is better than there. And I would expect it to be better in Dallas. So anyway, just from what I've experienced, it's not bad, bro. It's not bad. But yeah, of course, it ain't no king taco, man. Come on. All right, guys. Man, we've been going for over an hour and a half here. Good stuff. Great calls, great points all around. I'm sticking with my prediction. Even after these weights, I'm going to take Usyk by decision. Very, very cautiously, very anxiously, very nervously taking Usyk by decision. I promised myself I'd never pick against him again. Nothing would surprise me, though, tomorrow. It's the theater of the unexpected, right? So I just hope that we get a really, really great fight in that it isn't decided by Mark Nelson. Or who I'm just thinking back, like there are so many bad calls this guy has had. I seem to think there was like a Showtime or Showbox fight, something like that, way back that he screwed up. I mean, there's several fights I can think of, but yeah, I think I just hope that's not what we're talking about, because that's another thing too. When you pay for pay-per-view. And here in America, it's $80. I can't remember the exact price here. I don't know if you get a price break if you're subscribed to a platform or not. But man, it's like $80 usually. When you pay $80 and then you feel like you were ripped off, not because of what the fighters did or whatever, but because of what the people in charge did. You can only experience that so many times before you get kind of bitter and you stop caring. Right. And that's how a lot of fans feel. So this is a pay-per-view. People are paying a premium. I hope that they get it right, regardless of what happens. All right, guys. Good stuff. Enjoy the fights. And who knows? Maybe if I can, I'll go live right after. I'll see if I can. Even if it's just for a few minutes to talk about what happened. All right, guys, enjoy it, and I'll see you at the fights. Have a good weekend.